Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody. Ted will be on in a few minutes. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Steve, if you can put the flag up, we'll do the pledge. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for everybody being here. Madison Cawthorn could not be here, so either Catherine or Joe are in for him. Are they here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're both here. I'm Catherine, the Legislative Director and Counsel, and Joe Guy is the Legislative Assistant, and we are both on the call.
Okay, you've got your 10 minutes.
Well, thank you so much for letting us be part of this call, and I apologize that the Congressman was not able to make it. I think he is going to follow up, though, and see if he can touch base with y'all at another point. But just to kind of run through our legislative priorities, he is on the Ed and Labor Committee as well as the VA Committee. So workforce development is a huge priority for him this Congress. Career and technical education, the need for employer-led apprenticeships, and getting the vocational education back into the high schools and community colleges. We're also working on hosting a roundtable where hopefully the community colleges and the business leaders in high schools can come together and we can really hash out what they need and what we can do to help them in those matters. Also vaccines, working on ensuring that more vaccines get to North Carolina and that they're distributed fairly. Also COVID relief, what that will look like exactly, we're not sure yet, but that is something that the Congressman does support and wants to see. Also school choice, opening schools in the economy, ensuring that kids are back in the classroom. The science is clear. Students can return to the classroom if it's done safely with proper precautions. And so we want to see students in the classroom. We want to see things hopefully try to get back to normal. And then opening the economy. That's really the best COVID relief we can give the American people, is opening our economy and trying to get back to normal. Also, he is on the VA committee, as I mentioned earlier. And so we would love to see like employment and training for veterans. There are 54,000 veterans in our district. So that's going to be something important for him this Congress. Vocational rehabilitation opportunities and programs, and just making sure those veterans can readjust, into the civilian life from service. Also, worker protections, it kind of goes back to Ed and Labor, but, the minimum wage issues and trade and immigration issues that affect workers and employers. And that's something I'll let Joe kind of dig into the weeds with. But that's something that the Congressman does care very much about. And then, red tape with OSHA and just trying to get through the bureaucratic red tape. And then also whether, it's ag, as far as the red tape, what we can do in that aspect and help our ag community and infrastructure as well, ensuring, our dams and our roads and our highways are up to par. And then I will let Joe jump into broadband and also trade and immigration real quick, if that's okay.
Sure. So as Catherine mentioned, we're going to be working on some immigration stuff, and what we're prioritizing right now is H-2B visa reform, because we think that during a pandemic, we should be focusing on having American workers have priority on the jobs. So we're going to be looking at that. And as far as broadband goes, we're going to be looking at how we can address the mapping problems that we have. I know it's a big issue in North Carolina. We're going to be looking at mapping problems, overbuilding, improving access for small businesses to have more competitive access to the federal loan programs at USDA and the FCC, ensuring that there's tech neutrality in all of that, and seeing what we can do to work on state and local regulations to make private sector engagement more fruitful. And that's about it for that.
So that is what we're our top priorities in a nutshell. Of course, there are other things that we would love to work on, but at a million-foot level, that's that's where we'd like to start. And, if anyone would like to reach out, we'd love to stay in contact and see what we can do to be helpful. I don't know if Steve, you could circulate maybe our contacts after or help, the best way to do that, but we would love to stay in constant communication with y'all and just see what ways we can be helpful.
Thank you, Steve. People that want to ask a question, they can park that somewhere, can't they?
Yes, if anybody is looking to ask a question, we have a chat box. Please put your question in there, and we will be answering those at the end.
Great. Anything else from Catherine or Joe?
I think that's it right now.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Senator Heiss, glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. Wish it was in person again. I miss those opportunities, but I guess we're all getting proficient on the GoToWebinars and Zoom and every other type of meeting that's out there. It's been a whirlwind of a starting session so far at the General Assembly. I've had the privilege so far to introduce two bills that are really making a lot of impact. The first one is spending the previous amounts of COVID relief funds. These are very targeted funds that are looking very much at vaccines, making sure that we have the system in place to put them out there. We had a really rocky start with the rollout for vaccines with the Department of Health and Human Services, and they decided to send them all to Charlotte rather than put them into the rural areas of Western North Carolina. We think we have that ironed out at this point and are in a better position for receiving those vaccines as the numbers increase from the federal government and making sure they get out. The governor is even proposing moving beyond the 65 and older population and put in a priority for teachers for the next level as we get into essential workers and move that forward. The other bill I've got in is to reopen the schools. Pretty surprisingly, we still have, of the school districts in the state, we still have 39 districts that are still on complete virtual learning where the kids have been. Now, I know we do much better than that in Western North Carolina, and I have districts for elementary schools that have been in since August. The conflict seems to be on high school and middle schoolers and being able to put them back in the facilities. We have the bill on the governor's desk now to reopen those. We are anticipating a veto from the governor, but we're working hard both to make sure that doesn't happen and to address it if it does. Next one we've got coming up is also dealing with high school athletics. The governor has really cramped down on high school athletics as football is beginning to start in the middle of winter. And he has put a 100-person limit on our stadiums. And so dealing with high school coaches and others who've had basketball and others going on, where a gymnasium has a limit of 25 individuals, with 15 on the basketball team and 10 cheerleaders. Players and teenagers are having to choose one family member who can come see them in a game. And when you get into complex family dynamics, that's causing a lot of problems for coaches and others, and we're trying to open that up. We got a lot of information last week on the budget situation. In some ways, we're in a really good place in the budget. Being able to build a savings reserve over the years and being prepared for this pandemic really put us in a position that we didn't have to cut services or eliminate people to continue to operate. Revenues have actually turned out really well for us in this fiscal year, but most of the funds we're seeing generated are what we call non-recurring funds. So there's funding available for, and when you add COVID funds to that, for targeted relief and one-time expenditures, but it's still a very tight budget for recurring expenditures, which would include new positions, raises, those type of things. And as we balance those, it's kind of interesting. The non-recurring side is where we're having a lot of this growth come into the funds, and it may look like we may be in a position to have as much as $4 billion without another COVID relief bill coming. And from what no one knows what that's going to be from the feds, but there is a potential of another $7 billion coming to North Carolina. But again, it would be in that non-recurring side for one-time expenditures. But those funds do put us in a very good position to make a large broadband infrastructure investment. We've started the GREAT program over the last couple of years and have put another 30 million to that. We're in conversations about expanding that in this year. But those non-recurring funds to kind of get the fiber out, to get those connections out, we're working hard on putting together a package that would make a very significant investment in North Carolina, and are partnering with a lot of broadband providers across the state to make sure that would happen. The challenge is, the other challenge is in this session, we're always waiting on the feds. They keep talking about all these policies in the COVID bill, from everything from minimum wage increases, which could be devastating to our businesses, to amounts of unheard of money just dumped on the states to be put in, and how we spend that in the time periods they give us and stay within the rails that they've given us. They've sent a lot of money now, but it's all been so focused and directed on the COVID reliefs and others that we've had a lot of challenge of meeting our needs while we have an excess of funds, because it simply doesn't meet the criteria. This session, I was once again elected as Deputy President Pro Tem of the Senate, which does mean I serve on all the committees in the Senate and get an opportunity to preside from time to time. And it is also, I will chair Elections and Redistricting Committee, this is the biennium time. The census data is coming back out, although it seems to be delayed now until September. But we will be redrawing all the districts, congressional, state Senate, and state legislative districts during this session. So it's a lot of work coming, but a delay in the census has kind of put that work off for us this year. And this will also be my first session as one of the chairs in the Senate for the Appropriations Committee. So I, along with Senator Harrington and Senator Jackson in the Senate, will be directing the Senate's writing of the state budget. The Senate gets to go first this year, and once we get all that done, then we'll let the House try to mess it up before they send it back. But so I appreciate that, and I'm sure Danny does too. This is coming in, but it's a pleasure to represent the entire area, including Rutherford, Polk County, but also McDowell, Mitchell, Yancey, and Madison counties in this district. This is my 6th term. I will have served 12 years at the end of this term. Hard to believe it's moved that fast. But looking forward to these kind of conversations that we have every year, and I'll be glad to continue to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Senator Heiss. Appreciate your input. Has Ted Alexander joined yet? Steve?
No, he hasn't.
Okay. All right. Let's skip to Dan Gurley.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, first of all, you can tell how long Senator Heiss and I have known each other because he called me Danny rather than Dan. So it goes back somewhere north of 40 years, doesn't it, Ralph? But I appreciate the opportunity to fill in for the speaker today and just share a little bit about what's going on in the House. I know we've got a couple of our House members here that'll be talking shortly, Representative Johnson, Representative Hastings, both of whom, by the way, do an excellent job for this region. They're both extremely focused on taking care of their constituents. We appreciate everything that they do for the speaker and for this body. So a little shout out to them. First thing I would pick up on is something that Senator Heiss said, and this is a really important priority for the speaker, and that is actually getting students back in school safely. And so we do expect that the legislation that is sitting on the governor's desk that we believe would safely reopen schools probably will be vetoed. We may have an opportunity to override that veto. I know we have 69 Republicans in the House. We only need 3 Democrats to join us. And if memory serves me correctly, we had somewhere close to 10 Democrats voted with us on the reopening school legislation. So that's something that we're very much focused on. Building on that, one of the speaker's key priorities is making sure that when the students are back in school, that we're able to assess them and help them regain a lot of the lost opportunity that we've had to deal with in the pandemic. We know that if students are not reading at grade level by the 3rd grade, that they're destined for a lifetime of difficulty ahead of them. And students have struggled in this virtual environment. We need to make sure that they're properly assessed and that there's learning options for them going forward. So another piece of legislation that the speaker introduced, which is a key priority for him, is giving parental choice for one of 2 things: a funded 6-week-long summer school session, or that, frankly, students who are not achieving where they need to be at grade level would then repeat the same grade that they have been in. It's a parental choice option. The speaker feels very strongly about making sure that children have an opportunity to learn and that they be afforded that summer school session, whatever their parents would choose for them. So that legislation is now moving here on the House side. It has good bipartisan support. We expect to get that over to the Senate hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And then the other thing I would focus on, as Senator Heiss has also touched on, is COVID relief. It's going to be raining money from Washington. It already is, and but as was pointed out, these are one-time dollars, and they're very difficult for. There are great ways to spend them, but it sets up an interesting budget dynamic for us when we have to look at whether these the things they're used for are one-time expenses or they're those recurring expenses that Senator Heiss talked about. And so I think once again you're going to see a session that is largely dominated by how we manage COVID from all aspects, whether we're talking about education or vaccinations or every aspect really of how we live. I'll touch on one other thing real quickly. I think probably is important, and I noted there were several things in your legislative agenda which I have looked over, and I do want to say just a word about transportation. Transportation continues to be a key asset for this state. We've got to continue to invest in transportation. Frankly, our NCDOT has struggled in recent years, but we believe that they are headed in the right direction now. There's been a revamp of the DOT board. There has been completely new leadership installed at DOT, and as was pointed out earlier, revenues have held up better than we expected. And so that's good news for all of us. It's good news for your part of the state, and we'll continue to work with DOT to make sure that they're delivering important projects. They're going to benefit everyone. And final thing I would just say is I just made the reference to your part of the state. I want you to know that's also my part of the state. I'm a Mitchell County native and glad to, my family's still in Mitchell and Yancey counties, and even though I live in Raleigh, that's back home for me. So glad to, and if I needed to, I could jump on the road and get you from Kaiser to Polkville to Newhouse if I had to. So that's it, Steve. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Jake, I stepped over you. I'm sorry. I missed you, Jake. I hope you're still here, and we'll back up to Jake Johnson.
No, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. And can everybody hear me okay? I'm in the car headed up to Raleigh, and I've got it on speaker. If I need to take it off, I can. Can you hear
So
me?
we can hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate hearing from Ralph and Dan. And Dan's too humble to say it, but he just got named Deputy Chief of Staff to the Speaker, which means now I just call him for transportation and a bunch of other stuff. So Dan's a great resource for the Speaker's office. I'm glad he could be on. Ralph and I share Polk County, so we overlap on a lot of things, and it's great to get to work with him. And what I'd say about the budget is, if the Senate just gets it right over there, we wouldn't have to redo anything with it. So we'll take it and see what they come up with. And when it comes to a lot of this COVID money that you heard Ralph and Dan talk about, really, I'm looking at things that we can invest, and it may be one-term money, but it may be things we can spend wisely on that will pay off over time. Things like broadband infrastructure, those are things I look at that, I'm not thrilled about the deficit that we're running up at the national level. I think that's something that someone who's a fiscal conservative like myself looks at and kind of cringes at. But the reality is, if we don't spend it, another state will. And we want to make sure we take care of the people here in North Carolina. So if we're going to spend this money that's coming down from the federal level, I want to see it being spent on things that pay off long term, whether it be human capital or physical capital. We want to make sure we're investing wisely. And I think broadband, if you look at one thing that really touches all aspects of life, whether it be, education, whether it be telehealth, starting a small business that you're partially or fully running from home, all of these things depend on reliable internet access. So until we have that, that's just got to be a top priority. This is my first full term in the House. I was appointed in August 2019, but this will be my first full term in the House. I'll serve as chair of IT appropriations. So obviously broadband and working with those providers is going to be a huge part of my time and what I'm doing. Then I'll serve as vice chair of the overall appropriations and vice chair of commerce. So definitely want my focus to be geared toward economic and workforce development. Working with some guys right now on some great programs to go after these high school students who are kind of undecided. That's really kind of the target, and approach them and, not try to convince them to go down one path or another, but at least make sure they know that, hey, you can go to a four-year university and this is what you're going to come out making, and this is the average student debt. Or you can go into one of these trade schools and here's your average starting salary without owing hardly anything, if anything. So, it's not our job to pick winners and losers in the as far as workforce development and, gearing people toward companies and things like that. But I would argue it is our job to make sure people know what their options are. And these kids coming out know exactly what their options are. I mentioned working with providers. One thing I really want to work on this next time is getting to our unserved areas. We have a lot of areas that have, definitely need some improvement on their internet speed and reliability. Then we've got a whole other faction of our state that really has no internet whatsoever. So if we're going to prioritize time and resources. We have to do it in the most efficient way possible, but have to make some effort to reach these unserved areas, especially, with learning going a lot more online, not just because of COVID. That's just the way education as a whole is trending. The student in our area has never been exposed to the portals and way to take quizzes and assignments online. They get to, a level of higher education and are unfamiliar with it. They are at a huge competitive disadvantage. So those are things I'm working on, and would be happy to take questions at the end. But glad we could be on, and I hope next year we're back in person doing this thing where we can eat good food and fellowship like we're used to. But thank y'all so much. I appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jake. Has Ted joined us yet? Ted Alexander?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay.
I actually called him or texted him and he says he's on the road, wasn't sure how to do it on the phone, so I gave him the access and the phone thing, so he may be joining us very shortly.
Okay. All right. Robin Ramsey.
Oh, hold on just one
See-
second, sir.
see
I
you.
believe we skipped Kelly Hastings.
Oh, yeah, let Kelly go.
Where,
He's more important
where
than
is
me.
He joined us. Representative Hastings, are you on the call?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be very
I
brief.
don't have him on my list, but okay, go.
I'll be very brief. And so, actually, I'm on the road too, but I've pulled over so I can speak just a few minutes. Sounds like most of the things have been covered, but I will say this, just chairing the House committee for nominations to the Board of Governors, which you know is very important to not only Western North Carolina, but the whole state. And I think we've just about got that squared away, and we'll be moving forward with either an election process or a resolution here pretty shortly. In fact, we were on the phone this morning about that. The other thing, I guess I would follow up with Dan. The last time I reported on, after we left the old equity formula where a powerful politician could insert a project into the budget, transportation project, we passed strategic transportation investments. So sort of my task has been to be behind the scenes and figure out how all of that works out in conjunction with our local planning organizations, RPOs and MPOs, the state, and of course, most of those projects have to also be approved by the federal government. And so I mentioned that we are definitely opening up Western North Carolina. We've got 3 key airports right now, of course, and right there at Henderson and Buncombe counties, and then Greenville, and then of course Charlotte. So to open up Western North Carolina, we focused on the 74 corridor. And so I think I hear the Mayor Neisler and others on the Gaston, Cleveland, Lincoln MPO. So we've got the Interstate 85 widening. All of those projects have scored in the statewide mobility tier. They scored well enough that they didn't cascade down into another tier. So 85 coming out of the Charlotte airport, the 2 bridges coming west to Western North Carolina would be the South Fork and the Catawba River bridges. Those are going to be widened and replaced with 6 lanes each. And then, of course, the Shelby bypass, the final 2 phases are now funded. As many of you know, the first 3 phases were under the old equity formula. So the speaker allowed me to chair transportation and really learn and work behind the scenes and make sure that we got our projects prioritized. And we have, and I no longer chair transportation, but we successfully got those prioritized. Those final 2 phases of the US 74 bypass in Cleveland County, those projects cascaded out of statewide mobility and cascaded down. So we had to negotiate with the MPO and the division engineer for prioritization points, and we got those. So those 2 final phases are funded. So you can see that with hundreds of millions of dollars of transportation projects coming, we're opening up Western North Carolina without question. And so I guess I would just leave it at that. So most of the other items have been touched upon a little bit, and but I do appreciate being here, and I appreciate being able to serve with my colleagues, and I appreciate being able to meet with people who have a lot of interesting topics at heart that are really good for the people of not only Western North Carolina, but the whole state. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. Has Ted figured out how to get here yet? Apparently
I
not.
still don't see him on the call or on the
Okay.
list, so I guess not.
Okay, Robin,
Okay, can you hear me?
we can.
Okay. I wrote down a few things so I wouldn't go down a rabbit hole, but I certainly miss seeing everyone, and the networking was the best part of this breakfast. Learning also, but definitely networking. Thank you for inviting me. I greatly appreciate it, Steve and Mayor Fred. So apparently we're in the business of printing money in DC. and dispersing it. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but we definitely need to keep the economy going. And one of the main things that we have seen is the digital divide. So one glaring issue that became even more glaring during the last year is the digital divide. Whether it involved education, working from home, or telehealth, the haves and the have-nots have showed us with crystal clear vision that the time to close this digital divide was yesterday. One side says that cutting regulatory red tape, particularly in permits, would allow for expedited deployments, while the other state that the reason we are where we are today is by lack of oversight. I know there's a couple of things coming up that you guys might be interested in. There's a WNC Broadband Summit on March 2nd. And then the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the NTIA, which is a part of the Department of Commerce through its Broadband USA program, is hosting a webinar on what we passed in the year-end omnibus legislation, which included several broadband and connectivity expansion bills. That's going to be on St. Patrick's Day, apparently, Wednesday, March 17th from 2 to 3. And I think you can find that at Broadband USA. They do a lot of good stuff with broadband. SRB, which is Senator Richard Burr, is now ranking member on HELP, which is Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. So he's definitely focused on the COVID issue and how we can get back to a semi-normal pattern after that. So we're in a new Congress, and the slate has been wiped clean from the last 2 years. We have a new administration, we have a new Congress, some of the same priorities, but there's also some new ones, and things are going to change with a new president. So we will see what happens. The best thing I can say that anyone in the IPDC region can do is just stay in touch with us and let us know what's going on out there. Whether it's me or Jordan or Senator Heiss or any of the elected officials, we all can't be where you are. I personally have 20 counties that I have to keep up with. So please let us know what we can do to help. We're here to help any way we can. If the federal government touches it, we can help with it, or at least try to help with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Jordan, we all ready? Nope.
Yes, sir. I'm here via telephone. I had some internet issues, so I certainly understand the rural issues that we have with the internet, but can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. First of all, it's an honor to represent the senator here in Western North Carolina. The last year has been very interesting for everyone in the region. One thing that I want to highlight that I think that we do very well in the IPDC region and Western North Carolina is the partnerships that we have with our local elected officials, both here in the IPDC region and in Raleigh. I know that anytime I pick up the phone, everyone's very responsive, and I want to say thank you, and I know Senator Tillis appreciates that. The first thing I want to say is when COVID-19 came to the United States and came to North Carolina, Senator Tillis was very proactive. And in the last year, we held over 54 telephone town halls with all 100 counties, with most of the 10 million people of the state of North Carolina. Literally, we would call 20 counties, 10 counties, 5 counties. We could have anywhere from 40,000 to 140,000 people on the telephone. And that was for the simple reason to encourage folks to follow the CDC guidelines and to do what we could do to keep people healthy and also inform people who had questions and issues. The senator's top priority is to protect North Carolina's jobs and small businesses, and we can't do that if we're not healthy. And obviously, we've worked hard to support research and development and strengthen America's supply chains and restore our nation's stockpile. To date, I believe we've helped to secure it's over 2 million COVID-19 vaccines, and almost all those vaccines have been distributed with more on the way. Going back to what Jake Johnson, Representative Johnson said earlier, federal spending, I think, is a problem, but Senator Tillis has what he refers to as the North Carolina First program. And if there's money from the federal government being distributed to the states, we want that money here in North Carolina. So if there's federal money available through grants and you need letters of support, it's our job to support you. let us know. Another big topic, obviously, today has been broadband internet. Senator Tillis helped secure $23 million in grants to expand access to high-speed rural broadband internet. Specifically, more recently, and I think they're meeting in Washington today, along with Senator Burr's staff, with Starlink Technologies. The executives are coming to the Hill. We've been able to work well with the General Assembly. Starlink wanted to create pilot programs to where states made it friendly for them to launch internets to get broadband access to rural areas. The General Assembly amended the laws that cut the red tape, and that program is live here in North Carolina with 60 satellites that's already been put into orbit. I want to congratulate the Rutherford County for recently getting the $900,000 for the broadband and housing aid. That was a CDBG grant. As far as what's going on in D.C. this week, Senator Tillis is on the Judiciary Committee. Merrick Garland's confirmations are going on right now in the Judiciary Committee to be Attorney General. We expect that to be done by tomorrow. Aging Committee is important to the IPDC region and all of Western North Carolina. And Senator Tillis, last legislative session, co-sponsored the legislation to reauthorize the Older Americans Act. And I know there's been federal money distributed not to just this region, but all of North Carolina. Kind of a big overview right there, but just kind of some of the priorities that the senator's working on now. I will say, I think it is important to note that Highway 74 and the bypass is very, very important for economic development for our region. I work personally with Kyle Sanders, who is over economic development for the senator and has recently just been promoted to deputy chief. He did communicate with the previous secretary over at Department of Transportation about prioritizing the future designation of Highway 74 to be an interstate. But like Robin said, most of the administrative priority slate has been swept clean, and we will, when the time is appropriate, have that conversation with the Biden administration. Asheville Airport, Representative Hastings mentioned it. We were able to secure $10 million for North Carolina's rural airports last year. That was a big announcement right before Christmas, I believe, if I remember correctly. And good things are happening. It's not all bad. If we can help you in any way, I want you to always feel free to reach out to me. And I think I just want to highlight again the partnership that we all have, not just in the IPDC region, but all of Western North Carolina with our elected officials. Thank you guys for your service, for what you do. And if we can ever be of assistance, you have our telephone numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Has Ted joined us yet? Guess not. All right. If I haven't missed anybody, looks like it's time for Scott Neisler and Carol Pritchard.
Hey,
right.
Is Carol on? Well,
Yes, I
I'll
believe
take
she's. Carol, are you here by phone? Oh, you know what? I think she is attending. I'm not sure if she called in. So Scott, why don't you go forward?
All right, that sounds great. I first and foremost want to really get down and thank each and every one of y'all, and I'm speaking of our representatives, for what you do each and every day for us. You know, we as elected officials get to sleep on our same bed every night, and being able to be, you know, closer to home and closer to the constituents, it is good, and I appreciate y'all, you know, being willing to listen to, you know, what we hear on our constituents. And again, I want to thank you all for what you do, because obviously we all don't really relish the idea of working on a real difficult situation with this coronavirus. And I know particularly one of our agenda items is the state level and federal support for local governments. And I think it's been said maybe on the federal level that, you know, why should we help and bail out cities that have not been, you know, run the correct way? And I would say the majority of these cities that need the support, need it because of the virus. And so we look to you to maybe try to help with that, with the coronavirus, as it sort of devastated the local economy. And then some of us that operate our own, electric systems, you got people that on cutoff lists, that have a difficult time, and we have, bad debts because of that. So it's not necessarily because of anything that we controlled. It was something because of this virus that is, sort of just devastated the financial situations of the cities and county governments that we all attend to. I am hopefully, thankfully, y'all will be thankful that I'm not going to sit here and read every single thing we have on the legislative agenda. We will send you all a email with those agenda items that'll I guess underline everything that we're saying there. So I'm just really basically going to hit the high points. In fact, we talked so much about coronavirus. I want you to know that I really hate that we weren't able to get together and go to Tryon Equestrian Center and have a great brunch. I missed the socialization. To the fact that my wife has gotten so phobic over it, I get Lysol every night when I come in the door. She doesn't want me to bring that virus in. And the good news is I've smelled so much sanitizer that I don't have any dirty thoughts anymore. So anyway, we'll move on from the coronavirus. But one of the themes that I think we have on our legislative agenda item is to improve the broadband connectivity. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up. And I think I enjoyed Representative Johnson's talk, and knowing that he's on the IT committee. I think that it's a matter of something that I think we can work in collaboration with to make sure that we connect broadband throughout all of North Carolina. And I consider it broadband being the electricity of the early 1900s, that this needs to be connected because it's becoming a part of life that's it's a necessity. It's not anything that's a luxury anymore. And I'd look Representative Johnson into seeing that maybe the cities and maybe even bring in the electric cities coming into maybe cities being able to fund the backbone or the infrastructure it takes to let any ISP get on it, just like you guys did in the last session with electric co-ops. And then once, just like the commercial suppliers of broadband, whenever they're able to connect cities, then it becomes financially viable because of that, to be able to go into the rural areas that are around all of these cities, to be able to really effectively connect all of North Carolina. So cities are very willing to get into this broadband and not become ISPs, because we'd be chasing technology, and we don't want to do that. But we do know that fiber is the key, and we can easily help finance and fund that backbone for ISPs to be able to access that. And I think that we can connect all of North Carolina. And again, I look at it as being something that budgetarily can be spread among all of North Carolina and not just the state budget. So that's one of the things that I wanted to do, to look over that, because of it's in the economic, community, and workforce development, well as the broadband highlight that we've got on our legislative agenda. I want to also thank you guys. We'll move on to thanking you for what y'all did in making sure y'all had a rainy day fund, because as Senator Heiss said, y'all are in, I think North Carolina is in probably a very enviable situation as far as COVID relief. I don't think most states were able to plan for these emergencies that we've had. And it's not just been COVID, it's been hurricane relief as well. And so I want to thank you guys for being physically responsible for what you guys have done with the budget. And y'all done an excellent job of that. And knowing that, we're in really good hands in Raleigh. Also, thank you again for shoring up the transportation. I know you guys went to the bond market and shored that up. And once again, transportation is very important, as we've talked about with our roads. The Highway 74 becoming an interstate and all that's just going to be just that much better. Also wanted to highlight too, being able to help these small communities. They're in dire need of infrastructure improvements. And I know we've got two communities in our isothermal district that are in real dire shape as far as infrastructure is concerned. And, you can make the case that, hey, some of these cities shouldn't be cities because they're not doing what they need to do. But I think the strength of cities, are our backbone and what makes the state good, are good, strong cities. And LGC, I know, is working with the state auditor to maybe try to shore up some of these cities. But infrastructure is going to be a big thing for us. Housing, I think that's self-explanatory. We've got, the investment in trying to make affordable housing for all of us is a very big top priority. But I just wanted to hit the highlights. And then in closing with our legislative agenda, it's not that we want to be here and do all the asking. We don't want to tell you guys this is what we want. We also want to be, as a cog, somebody that can help you. And anything you guys would think we can do better in the cog level to serve you is what we want to do. We're here to not just always ask for the give, but also ask what we can do to help you to make your job much easier in serving all of North Carolina that you do so well in. And with that, we can go to questions about the agenda and anything else you have on that. And thanks again for letting me speak.
Thank you, Scott, for agreeing to do the job you're doing.
Mayor Vice, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sorry. I don't know why. I was muted by organizers, so I kept trying to talk. And thank you, Sarah, for
hey, Carol,
unmuting me. Thank you. And thank you so much, Scott, for doing a wonderful overview of what our legislative agenda is. And I just want to mirror what Scott has said. I think this really was a collaborative effort. And, I think everything on the agenda is something that affects everyone in the IPDC region. We are each individually have our own challenges. Certainly we have huge infrastructure challenges, but all the challenges really mirror what we need to do as a whole to make Western North Carolina move forward. So I thank you all truly for your attention and your interest in what we're doing, and for being willing to listen to what our ideas are for some of the things that we think would profit us all. So just wanted to add that. And thank you, Scott, nice sir, for carrying it while I sat here mute.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, Carol, we apologize for that. I'm glad you could join us and speak to that. We have a couple questions. Senator Heiss, I believe you answered this one in the chat box, but I want to go ahead and ask it anyway in case anybody didn't see that. But going back to talking about the census, does it look like we will get 1 or 2 new House seats in Congress?
Well, as I responded earlier, I think it's important to note that for the last 2 decades, North Carolina has kind of been shaved out of getting that congressional, particularly how the federal government has moved, where military personnel are counted or where they are stationed. But that put us very close, and we've had tremendous growth over the last 10 years. We're, as a state, over 10 million in population now. So I think it is very likely that we would pick up 1 seat. There is a very small likelihood. Last estimate I saw was somewhere around 5% chance we would grow enough to have reached a 2nd seat. But I think we are looking at having 14 congressional seats. The dependent is we've also had, with a delay in the census, generally the census date is April 1st for counting, but about the time the pandemic started, we've seen a huge increase in migration to the state, as anyone in real estate should be able to tell you, for what they're seeing come from other states to North Carolina. And so in some ways, the delay may actually help with our population numbers, as they were kind of struggling in getting those last bits of information in. But once those come available, there are congressional committees that have very defined processes that will give us the apportionment numbers, and then we'll begin that process. It's looking sometime around mid-September.
Great. Thank you for that. And I believe there was a question from Congressman Cawthorn's office. Catherine, are you still on the line?
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe you or somebody had put a question in the chat box.
Yeah, so we actually put two. One would be, what exactly can we do to help in the broadband area, and, get as much help to y'all as we can. And the other one would be transportation as well.
Gotcha. Well, I do know that certainly broadband is an issue that we feel very strongly about here, as well as transportation. And I know that each one of us on the call, everyone has spoken, but I think it would be good to, if anybody does have any thoughts or comments, you can say so now, or I can, sir?
Yeah.
Hey,
Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Hey, this is.
One thing that.
Hey, that's Dan. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Okay. One thing I think is important for us to understand and be looking at is, and this is going to need to be done at both the federal and the state level, is the revenue formula that we use to fund transportation. The current formula is not sustainable for the future. We are absolutely going to have to come up with a new revenue model for transportation. Just increasing the fuel tax is not going to work. And at least here at the state level in North Carolina, we basically fund transportation three ways. We do it through fuel tax, we do it through fees, like at the DMV, licensing, LPAs, things like that. And then we do it on the sales tax on vehicles. And what we're seeing is, as transportation broadens, as we see cars becoming more fuel efficient, hybrid cars, electric cars, that old model just isn't going to work. Now, the good news is, as I pointed out earlier, revenues have held up reasonably well through the pandemic. The DOT is in reasonably good shape. We have been able to sell bonds. I can tell you that the speaker at some point in the near future will be filing another bond, a piece of legislation, a bond bill for transportation and education. It seems that there's a broad appetite for that now. We're kind of crazy not to be using bond money as cheap as it is now. And so that's going to provide us sort of a bridge to get to the future. I think even some folks over on Senator Heiss's side of the building might be inclined to go with support a bond package of some type this time. But and that's going to be helpful to us in the short term. But we really got to start looking at a new revenue model going forward. And I think the smart thing for us to do is not try to have some wholesale overnight change on that, but is to do this incrementally and start working with some of the smaller ways that we can transition into a more forward thinking, more timely approach to how we fund transportation. So that's something that's going to affect all of us at the local, state, and federal level. So something to think about.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
And this is Kelly Hastings. I'll follow up on that and say that, the important thing was a few years ago for people to, under the new STI law, was to get in the ring and start fighting for the projects that are going to be prioritized within your RPO or MPO. because remember, those are fiscally constrained and those projects have to be done within a budget. And so sometimes it makes for a tough call when some projects have to be eliminated. But you ask about the federal issue. One thing to remember, they always have a Federal Highway Administration staff person in those MPO meetings. And fortunately for me, ours was a friend of one of my college buddies. And so, but I would say from a federal standpoint is when those RPO and MPO meetings are occurring, get in there and make your opinion known, because they do have official public comment times, and those public comments do matter. So anyway, thank you.
So I also want to just add real briefly, one of the kind of immediate issues we're dealing with is when the governor accelerated projects and really ran us into this kind of cliff of not having money available for projects. One of the things that they stopped, particularly across Western North Carolina, was trash pickup, road maintenance, mowing, as well as salt and sand availability for coming into this year. I will tell you that trash pickup is probably one of the #1 issues that I'm getting called into the office right now. We are very much working on the COVID bill right now to earmark funds to require them to restore those services. We really did this shift from having the prisons pick up the trash because DOT wanted to do it because they could do it cheaper than we could with the prisoners. But as soon as they let the contracts out and companies began to start, they shut them all down and literally shut down the companies that were doing this kind of trash pickup. And so I've got some areas of the state that it's horrific right now, what's left on the side of the roads and others. And we can't do a whole lot of conversations about new highways and others when we're just not in a position of taking care of what we have and doing that kind of maintenance. And it's an impact from travel and tourism to everything we do as this state begins to reopen. So making sure that they're actually out there recleaning those roads, picking up trash, and making up for lost time.
It's great. Thank you. I've got one other question from the audience. Is there any discussion in Raleigh this year to look towards a municipal local option sales tax for infrastructure needs?
So I will say that most municipalities have an additional, I believe it's quarter or half cent, depending on their size, available to them that would require a ballot initiative that they could use for general fund availability. Counties have more if it were designated for education. But I think what we're looking at right now is much more a structure with this one-time money of trying to get funds to water and sewer infrastructure and run a grant process, much more than we are looking to allow additional taxation or to raise taxes on individual or their purchases. So I think there is some availability right now for most local governments to implement that additional tax increase, but all of those tax increases would require voter approval.
I would just add to that. I'm only aware of one specific proposal in the state right now to do that, and that's the Charlotte proposal, where they're actually asking for a full 1 cent for a massive program that would be somewhere between $8 and $12 billion total. The speaker has met with the mayor of Charlotte and some of her staff and city officials. Yeah, we have given and will continue to give her a polite hearing on that. I think there are counties surrounding the Charlotte area that perhaps have a bit of a different perspective on how they would like to approach that. And so we'll just see how that all plays out. But I personally am not aware of any orchestrated effort, large effort to do anything more than what Senator Heiss has just mentioned, other than Charlotte.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have now. If anybody else has any others, please put them in the chat box now. While I wait to see if any others come in, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our participants and also all of our board, IPDC board, especially our chair, Fred Baisden, our vice chair, Max Hopper, and Mayor Scott Neisler and Carol Pritchett. Thank you for participating in this and helping us put this together. Also, a big thanks to my staff at IPDC for helping out, especially Sarah Kopkin, who is on helping us make sure that we keep on top of things and keep on top of questions. We will be sending out the IPDC legislative priorities to everybody here. And we will be following up with anybody if there are any last minute questions coming in. I don't see any coming in right now.
Steve,
So
I
I
might
think
want to
that,
ask one on the floor.
go for it, Max.
I hear everyone mentioning, I'm so thankful to hear folks talking about broadband and particularly rural broadband. But I want to make sure that top of mind is given to the bands around our towns and the edges of our counties. Now, I live down here right next to the end of the world at the South Carolina line in Cleveland County. We have no broadband. And costs to extend it, I've heard quotes to extend it 1,300 feet, $50,000 from the providers. These areas are not served, even though the maps say they do, because they serve one individual in a census tract, and they claim the whole tract is being served by broadband from the carriers. But generally, around every county and around every town, there's a circle of unserved folks where the profit ran out and the wires and fibers stopped. So as you're trying to work about the idea of rural broadband and improve it for where a lot of kids live, a lot of folks live, and frankly, where our growth in our counties are going to be. I think Mayor Neisler knows over there next to South Carolina, he's going to have a lot of growth. And fortunately, they're on 85, so they've got broadband. But as you move a couple of miles further south in Cleveland County, it goes away. And these carriers have not yet seen fit to do anything there. So I appreciate everything that you're trying to do. I just would like to remind you that there's an awful lot of folks on the edges of where we're serving today that are totally left out. And thank you very much for being with us. We're very fortunate to have such experienced leadership and senior leadership in the legislature in Raleigh.
Excellent. Thank you, Max.
Hey, Steve, this is Jordan, Senator Tom
yes,
Phillips' office. I just wanted to highlight the Starlink program that I mentioned earlier. That program is specifically targeted for folks that have zero broadband access. So it's a really good opportunity for us to, here in the state of North Carolina, to be a test program for that company. And like I mentioned earlier, I believe the meeting between Senator Byrd and Senator Tillis and Starlink Corporation is this afternoon to see where we're at on the progress. So I'm really excited about that opportunity and that we have here in Western North Carolina for folks who have zero access to fiber or, cable internet.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. Okay, we have one more question. Excuse me as I'm reading this off. What date and other information on the broadband conference? Oh yeah, Robin, are you still with us?
I am.
Could you?
My computer about died. Sorry.
That's okay. Could you tell us again when the broadband conference is?
So there's March 2nd was the WNC broadband. And then there's one that's broadbandusa.com. That's the one on March 17th.
Okay, great. And what we'll do on our end from IPDC staff is we will put that in our newsletter and on our website. So for those of you who may be interested, you can go to Region C, REGION, the letter C is in cat.org, and we will have those dates and information about both of those events on our website. Thank you, Robin.
Steve, there's one other thing that we might ought to mention, and Senator Heiss probably could jump in even better on this than I could. But because of the delay in the census information and the fact that we will begin the redistricting process later, it's likely to lead to having to push back the filing dates for municipal elections this year, and potentially even for filing for state offices. So I don't know, Senator Heiss, you may speak more to that than I can, but that very well looks like it will be a risk for some municipalities, if not all.
Yeah, I think not only getting the maps done, but in my experience chairing redistrict, the likelihood of not getting sued is somewhere around zero. This coming in with multiple cases in federal and state court. Any one of those, a judge is likely to put an injunction in to delay the filing. Although it could be, with municipal elections, there is still a likelihood that no districts are changing as a result of the redistricting. We don't have to, in this term, rebalance the population for any municipal districts or county drawn districts. Those aren't required to be drawn every 10 years. So some of those may be able to go through, but it could be just as likely we get a court order to stop all filing.
That is good to keep in mind. Thank you. We have one final question, and it is, does anyone have any insights on COVID funding for towns in North Carolina?
So the first I'll say is the interesting concept that the federal government has done. They have picked out large municipalities. As a matter of fact, anything over 200,000 in population, and have basically distributed the funds to them directly outside of the state system. So we're really trying to, and like the second COVID bill that's coming out, we really have to go in for the remainder of money and carve back out the money that they've already sent to the large municipalities to divide it up back to the smaller counties and municipalities across the state. That's taken some time, but I suspect next week we will see the second COVID bill running through the House, which will have some relief. Most that's come right now has been in form of education divided to the LEAs across the state, but I think you'll see some more of that in the second COVID bill as we finish up this round of federal funding. What we're hearing on the third bill coming from the federal government is a similar approach where the over 200,000s will receive funds directly. The rest of it will come to the state. So it's just a matter of making sure we're accounting for that, so that I think as intended, the large areas don't get the double dip in all the funds of the state.
Yeah, and we expect to file that bill by the end of this week. So Senator Heiss is correct on that. It should be filed and moving through the House to the House floor next week.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions for now. Mr. Chairman, it looks like we're all done with the questions, so I'll turn it back to you.
I guess Ted never got a chance to join us, but appreciate all of you taking the time out to be here. We know you, we know where you live, we know how to get in touch with you. So hopefully we can utilize that access.
I don't think that sounded like a threat, did it? I don't know. I know where we live too, Fred.
Yeah, they do. When we're talking about broadband, I heard a few things thrown out there that underserved or not served. We're going to have high speed in most everywhere if we're going to operate as people are doing now remotely. And we have a lot of areas that may have some form of internet, but it's so slow that they can't operate there. So fiber is the answer, as everybody said. We got a good bit of fiber around Saluda, but we still have areas outside that people live that we don't have fiber. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that when they were drilling and putting in lines, most places you can do 2,000 feet a day. When you're in rock, you can only do 800 feet a day. So we ran into spending all the money before they finished the process. So hopefully River Street's working with the state and the feds to finish their mapping and where they want to go. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Unless anybody else has something to say, we can let everybody go about their business. Thank you.
I hope
Goodbye.
the lights are better next
Thank
year.
you all so much.
Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you all next year in person.
Have a safe day.